On the ocean floor, the steel monster slowly emerges by its shadow. At first indistinct, it gradually takes shape, until, as you get closer, it becomes gigantic. Lying on its side, it's a ship ripped open beneath the waters, whose propellers have stopped turning forever. The story of these wrecks always begins the same way. A war, the madness or heroism of men, a bomb, a storm, an unknown reef, and a few seconds of inattention, a misread map by a ship owner, greed. And so these ships ended up sinking. They're called Zenobia, Sistelgorn, or Rosalie Mola. Some of them don't even have a name yet. In the metal guts of these abandoned ships, where living things often thrive and find refuge, a mysterious atmosphere emerges. In these plays of shadow and light, it seems as if the ghosts of drowned pirates come to dance, ready to rise straight from the past to fiercely defend their hypothetical treasure. But do these wrecks really hide something exceptional inside them? What can we really hope to find there? In reality, most of the time, the only treasures they contain are of symbolic or historical value. In the overwhelming majority of the holds of these sunken ships, you won't find any small fortune in gold, no treasure, nothing of value, except for the emotion and the stories of shipwrecks to discover and tell by the tens of thousands. Because throughout history, the ocean, helped by reefs, storms, and torpedoes, has swallowed up countless ships. We usually visit wrecks that are relatively accessible, close to the coast, and in shallow waters, such as the immense ferry Zenobia, which welcomes thousands of visitors every year. You won't find? Ships rarely choose where they sink, and in reality, the vast majority of wrecks are at depths inaccessible to divers, and sometimes extremely far from the shore. During World War II alone, it's estimated there were about 6,000. The number of ships over 400 tons that sank at sea, taking with them everything they contained. But this figure only takes into account large vessels, and if we expand the criteria to include ships of 200 tons, we start to see the number of wrecks contained in these immense cemeteries of machines that are the oceans increase even more. On this map, no less than 14,600 ships sunk during the Second World War are listed. But this number is obviously much higher. And if we go even further back in time, the number of ships known to have sunk starts to become staggering. On this other map, you can see the location of all known wrecks, from the smallest to the largest, and which lie at the bottom of the water. Between Cherbourg and Dieppe on the French coast, there are 4,500 of them. And each time, each red dot means that the wreck has not yet been clearly identified. On this other map, you can see the approximate position of 3,554 recorded wrecks that sank off the coast of Ireland and in the North Atlantic Ocean over the past 5 centuries. Except that these wrecks, most of which have never been explored, represent only 1/5 of the total number of ships considered lost at sea in the historical records of the Irish government. In other words, the exact locations of 14,414 other shipwrecks in these waters remain completely unknown today. From all eras and of all sizes, it is roughly estimated that there are millions of wrecks currently lying at the bottom of the ocean. And yet, despite this staggering number, discovering a wreck is generally very complicated. Here's a short list of the obstacles to overcome if you hope to find one. First, the wreck you're looking for has to still be there. Many, especially the oldest, have already been broken down by fungi and bacteria attacking their hulls. At best, only a few fragments remain. If the wreck you're looking for is relatively recent, say a few decades old, try to find out exactly where and when the ship was last seen on the surface. And this is to help you target and narrow down your search area as much as possible. In 1955, Cousteau and his team easily found the Sistelgorm wreck in the Red Sea. It should be noted that the position of this steamship, which left to supply the British Army in Egypt and was bombed and sunk by the German Air Force, was well known. It was found in the same spot where, 14 years earlier, bombs ignited its ammunition cargo, causing explosions that tore the ship apart from within. Today, This 130-meter-long wreck is one of the most visited in the world. You can venture among chests, overflowing with rusty objects in the holds, and discover the immense amounts of military equipment it was carrying. Motorcycles, trucks, even a locomotive. It was originally placed on the deck, but thrown by the force of the explosion, it now rests a bit further away, at nearly 35 meters deep. This gigantic ship, thanks to history enthusiasts who have fully digitized it, you can even visit it, from the deck to the engine room, even the deepest holds. And if you think it's impossible to pass over a 130-meter steel giant without noticing it, think again. The Rosalie Moller is similar in size to the Sistelgorm, with its 108 meters in length and nearly 20 meters in height. At first glance, it's not the kind of ship that would go unnoticed. And yet, this British cargo ship, which was sunk by the German army just 2 days after the Sistelgorm, was only found 53 years later. And this, even though it sank in one of the most dived and accessible regions in the world. And the deck of this giant is only 35 meters deep. Generally speaking, if the wreck you're looking for, whether it's a ship, a plane, or anything else, sank far from the coast, then expect to find it at a depth of 3,500 meters, and therefore you won't be able to send divers there. So, if you hope to see it at first, consider equipping yourself with a sonar, which should be very useful for spotting its possible wreckage. 3,500 below you. If something interesting seems to be taking shape there, don't get too excited too quickly. Because it's not uncommon for a promising shape anomaly detected on the screen to turn out to be nothing more than huge rock formations, looking very much like a ship's hull. To be sure, you'll have to go down to Sil to check. So make sure to bring a submersible that can withstand very high pressures and is equipped with powerful spotlights. At those abyssal depths, they'll be your only weapon to fight the total darkness. And then, after several dives, you might finally see a shadow emerge from those deep waters. An underwater ruin lying on the seabed, and as if frozen on its way to the next port, that discovery will be your treasure. But don't expect success. We usually return empty-handed from the depths. At the very least, it will take you several dives before you uncover something that, sometimes, you weren't even looking for. During these expeditions, it's common to find something completely different from the original goal. And it even happens regularly that you end up targeting the wrong thing. In 2006, during a dive aimed at finding the Imperial Navy destroyer Hayate, the first major Japanese warship sunk in 1941, and which we thought we had identified with sonar, a team on the surface operated an autonomous submersible that descended to the shape, using its mechanical claws and spotlights on a huge steel wreck. But very quickly, as we circled around, we realized that it was the wreck of a gigantic Japanese oil tanker. An interesting discovery, though not what we were seeking. After documenting the site and finding its traces in the archives, we were able to name this steel giant. And then, after 9 hours of diving, the submersible returned to the surface, loaded with unexpected discoveries. But also knowing that there is always a part of me down there somewhere. An Imperial destroyer that no one has ever found yet. In any case, if you don't find anything, cross-check your sources, review your theories, start over, persevere, search better, search elsewhere, farther out and deeper. Maybe in the end, you might even have the pleasant surprise of stumbling upon a wreck purely by chance. These scattered remains are from a 37-meter wooden schooner, likely from the mid-19th century. And they were discovered by a team from National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And above all, completely by chance, during a mission to test new equipment on their autonomous rover. A golden rule to follow. And if the building you're looking for is one of the oldest, it's best not to expect to find it in good condition. Because when wrecks have spent more than a century underwater, they're often reduced to nothing by the force of the currents and the passage of time. Yet, it's precisely on these sites, protected from divers by their depth. In these piles torn apart by the elements, you might have the best chance of finding something. Something with a value other than symbolic or historical. Because it happens, though rarely, that these ships reduced to shreds contain in their wreckage a lot of money. Unfortunately, the exact locations of these rare and real treasures hidden at the bottom of the seas are often closely guarded. To see exactly where the ships in question sank, you often need access to historical archives, documents, or maps that can be as sensitive as state secrets. But if you manage to get them and organize an expedition that can cost millions with modern oceanographic ships, sonars, and submersibles, then you could, with a bit of luck and perseverance, end up getting your hands on the Grail. Some call it the Sandros. This legendary Spanish galleon, found in 2015 off the coast of Colombia after decades of searching, is a mythical wreck because when it sank, it held piles of gold and jewelry in its holds. It is believed that this ship sank in 1708 by a fleet of British privateers during the War of Spanish Succession, which, carried down with it to a depth of 600 meters, took no less than 200 tons of gold, silver, and emeralds, whose combined value is estimated between 3 and 17 billion euros. From the torn carcass of the galleon, apparently, little remains but cannons. But maybe buried beneath the surface, near this pile of debris, a real treasure is literally hidden. Today, this treasure, sent to the bottom during a bloody naval battle, is now at the center of a fierce struggle. Is it diplomatic? Because more than 2 centuries after this tragedy, Bolivia, the country where most of the precious metals were extracted, Colombia, the country where the ship sank, and Spain, the country to which it belonged, they are all disputing ownership of the wreck. Each one sees it as their national treasure. A treasure that today, because of its value, could change lives, although in the past it has also taken many, because the terrible battle that sent the immense treasure to the bottom of the ocean was also responsible for nearly 600 deaths. Thus, the San Jose, like many other shipwrecks, has become a tomb. Today, most military submarines that sank during the Second World War are off limits, out of respect for those still trapped inside. This is the case, for example, with this Japanese vessel discovered in 2016 8 kilometers off the port of Pearl Harbor, which was sunk with all its crew on the morning of December 7, 1941. This other German submarine, the U-576, which sank in July 1942, was only recently found off the coast of North Carolina. It's also a military cemetery, since 40 men remain trapped inside that steel and rust prison. But these disaster sites can also become oases of life, because on the deck, as well as inside these steel giants, deep-sea wildlife comes to cling and proliferate. Here, the remains of the wreck of an American submarine that was sunk empty during a live fire exercise have been almost entirely colonized by a large number of deep-sea corals and have been transformed into places of life and refuge for many animals. In these other images, collected by the rovers of the oceanographic vessel Ever Nautilus, you can see just how much. The metal walls of these wrecks, once built for war and for killing, have now been taken over and transformed by the activity of living creatures. Yet, these flourishing oases in the deep are often only a few centimeters thick, of danger and death. Because while the thousands of wrecks sunk off the coasts around the world during World War II can be seen as treasure troves of memories from humanity's tragic history, they are also real time bombs, Pandora's boxes at the bottom of the oceans. In fact, almost all of these thousands of ships that have been rusting underwater for 80 years still contain huge amounts of pollutants and explosives. And most importantly, fuel. Its combined volumes greatly surpass the worst oil spills in history. For comparison, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker spilled 37,000 tons of fuel oil off Alaska in 1989. Whereas the tanks of all the wrecks sunk during World War II could contain up to 15 million tons. As for the United States ship Independence, which lies 800 meters deep, it's hard to imagine that on the other side of these steel hulls, on which countless living organisms proliferate and thrive, a terrible secret is hidden. Yet, this light aircraft carrier contains a concentration of mankind's madness. After serving in World War II, This ship was used in July 1946 as a target vessel for a whole series of nuclear tests. After that, it was converted into a floating decontamination laboratory before finally being torpedoed and sunk in 1951 off the coast of San Francisco, taking with it hundreds of barrels of slightly radioactive waste. In short, wrecks like these can serve as a reminder that humans would be wrong to mock the animals that live there, such as these sea sponges, which are literally organisms without a heart or a brain. Searching for wrecks is often like visiting one of the world's greatest museums, of the madness of men, but also, fortunately, sometimes of their courage and their success. Sometimes success requires running aground, as we are reminded by the presence of the striking and surprisingly well-preserved wreck of the Endurance, found at more than 3,000 meters deep. Nearly a century after the ship, crushed by the Antarctic pack ice, sank to the bottom of the Weddell Sea, leaving Sir Ernest Shackleton and his 27 crew members alone against the raging elements. And thus began one of the most incredible human adventures, which led these castaways to survive together for 22 months in the terrible conditions of Antarctica, to face temperatures as low as -45 degrees, and above all, for all of them to return, safe and sound by their own means. The nearest inhabited land is located thousands of kilometers away. When we tell you that a shipwreck can be the beginning of a great story, many have lived without love, but none without water.